Welcome one more day to Space in Armonía. This is a lovely afternoon. The birds are singing, the insects are collecting their nectar, and the colors are beautiful. Spring is in full bloom, and it's very enriching to be observing and listening in this environment, even though human civilization is near, and I can hear the wind carrying certain sounds from some school. Anyway, let's proceed. This is a bilingual channel where I publish videos on the subject of the tree of life and its principles of armonía, how it works in our life, how we can learn from everything that happens to us, everything we see. And precisely, today I'm going to speak about a very important principle, which is known as the principle of mirroring, the mirror effect, the principle of reflection. As within, so outside, the right mirrors the left. The masculine aspects should complement the feminine aspects, and vice versa. Actually, the other day, I was speaking with Kyle Macias in All Seeing One podcast program. There is also a YouTube channel called That Way. It's one of the programs in which I collaborate from time to time. And we were speaking about the feminine and masculine aspects of the divine, of Elohim, the intelligences and forces of nature. And that's part of the mirroring principle. But we have to explore the reflections deeper. We can learn much from observation, from feeling, from understanding how our inner world is mirrored outside in our human culture, and also certain behaviors. But we can also learn much from the world around us. This nature is very beautiful. However, notice how everything dies because there is a lack of flow. We don't receive all the vitality that would make our particular life on Earth immortal. The flow has been interrupted because of certain accidents that took place, certain modifications performed by architects long ago. And we have to understand how the mirroring effect can help us reestablish the whole flow of life through us, so that we can live again our original condition, which is wholeness, is absolute life, vitality. Health comes from wholeness. So if we are experiencing death, disease, suffering, misunderstanding, is precisely because there are fragmentations in our perception. We can even perceive certain fragmentation in a microscopic level. For instance, in quantum mechanics, scientists say that when they measure reality, they find packages of energy they call quanta. And when they don't measure, reality is like a wave. So this is the dilemma between wave and particle. Is reality a wave, a continuous flow of energy, or it is fragmented in packages of energy? They say that perception is what fragments reality. So maybe the problem is not so much in the essence of reality, but in the way we perceive reality, in the way we try to measure things, in the way we try to control, as scientists do. And in doing so, they find mathematical ways of deducing the existence of certain particles, not just electrons, protons and neutrons, but also neutrinos, muons, gluons, and who knows what else. But they don't realize reality in itself is not made up of bricks, of fragments. It's a continuous flow, and when they try to know reality better by means of quantum calculations, mathematical models, they are just make things more and more complicated without realizing that we can know reality with a more alive way of knowing, which is pure consciousness and conscience. And we have to be very clear about this distinction. Consciousness is awareness. It's a quality of pure light, which allows us to know the world and ourselves deeper and deeper, to find out the nuances, the different aspects that make our experience richer and richer. Whereas conscience is another quality of pure light, which allows us to know in every moment what is correct and what is wrong, what is deviating itself from the path of wholeness. In our society, people use the expression conscience in moralistic contexts. They say conscience is always connected to good and evil, but this is not necessarily the case. Because when we don't judge, we don't find what a beautiful bird I'm seeing. Excuse me, I like birds, and he was just in front of me. And as I was saying, when we don't judge, we don't find so much evil, even though there is evil, obviously. But we find more the idea of good or whole and deficient. So there is a tree of good and deficient, and a tree of full life. So conscience would be the integration of certain understanding and wisdom. Wisdom is knowing how to do what to do, having certain intuitions, but understanding is when we go through experiences and are able to see ourselves mirrored in the reflections of the world and integrate all that in our way of perceiving reality from a holistic point of view. So we can have much wisdom, but very little understanding. And we can have many experiences without understanding and without wisdom, which would be even worse, because that's when we get into chaos, into a situation where we don't understand, we don't know, we don't have intuition about what is taking place. And this is why we have to explore the qualities of consciousness and conscience deeper. Knowing how the inside is mirrored in the outside, see how even in our body we have a right side and a left side, so there is symmetry as well. The right hand side of the face seems to be a reflection of the left. The right hand is a reflection of the left hand. So many aspects in this world come in pairs that mirror each other. This is known as parity. And there is also a parity inside, outside. So having said this, notice how everything we see, everything we sense, everything we feel emotionally, or everything we sense mentally is an aspect of consciousness. Because consciousness is not a subject perceiving an object. The world we see is also the manifested aspect of consciousness. Therefore, there is a wholeness, like a wave. Subject, object is more like a process. In a wave you have the peak and the valley, but between them there is a movement. So, consciousness is the capacity of knowing ourselves deeper and deeper, and this helps us develop conscience, which allows us to understand true unconditional love, the integrity of pure life, mercy, compassion, because we feel the suffering in the world and we somehow want to open our heart, obviously to relieve the pain, but we have to understand the whole process. And this involves knowing very well why our society is in chaos. There are so many things that mirror the inner traumas of humanity that we have to understand them. And the best way of doing that is observing our culture, music, language, different traditions, and also the way we feel in relation to people. So let's start, for instance, with music. You won't see the type of music I make very much promoted in society because it's a more relaxing and insightful type of music, which, according to music industry, doesn't sell. You cannot make great business with it, even though there have been famous people doing sort of relaxing music, and there are many wonderful composers that are very successful. And of course, I'm not saying you cannot be successful composing music which is more spiritual in a sense. But the kind of music that is promoted nowadays is full of division, hatred, sexual suggestions, irrational sexuality, and this is intentional. That's not an accident. This is mirroring the inner state of certain individuals and how they use that to move the masses, hypnotize people, and make money out of it. And I can give many examples. Obviously, pop music, popular music, sells very well, but there is a very strong sexual component. You can see it even in the covers of the CDs or whatever. It sells more a half-naked woman than the woman which is covered with clothes. It sells more someone dancing with sexually oriented movements than someone that is not. Actually, the other day, I was watching a music video on PR, one of my favorite music channels, and they invited a very famous pop musician for youngsters, something which is uncommon in that channel, but maybe they invited this person to get more views. Actually, it had 7 million views, something which is amazing. And this young man who was singing sometimes grabbed his own parts as he was singing, something that is very common in people that sings hip hop and things like this. And that sexual movement gives us a sense of the certain type of attitude they had. There is an act of domination or orientation. They base everything on sex, which is an energy that grabs people's mind and deviates energy to a certain actions. It's a very instinctual energy that can be very easily distorted. And that's what industry does. Controls people by means of certain attitudes. And there is something very important, which is the rhythm of certain pieces of music. And notice how one of the most popular types of music nowadays is reggaeton, which is kind of Latin music. I don't like Latin music in general, but reggaeton is particularly annoying. It's a very sexually oriented type of music, not just because of the things they say, but because of the movements. And it's very curious because the rhythm of reggaeton, which is tum This comes from traditional Sufi music and other types of music in which that rhythm has a different effect. I know this because many years ago I was experiencing sessions of Sufi music in the Persian House of Madrid, and that rhythm is very beautiful, but it has a different effect. You can sense a wave of energy elevating you, making you lighter, so to say, but because the context is completely different. So this means many humans are using something which in principle can be sacred, but they use it to induce hypnotic states of behavior. This is the tragedy. Something which comes from true life becomes even evil, because they also induce hatred, division, discussions, arguments, accusations, using those rhythms. This is the tragedy of music industry, which is run by evil. And I say evil because when you do something against humanity, against an animal, and you have some knowledge of how to do it, and even why, then that's evil. I'm not accusing, I'm just noticing something. Evil is the opposite of life when you read the word backwards. And we see this sort of darkness mirror in our language as well. For instance, in English, you greet with the word hello. Well, you have the word hell. You are constantly sending people to hell every time you greet them. Or the word greetings reminds of greed. This is a vibratory affinity between the words, because words are vibrations and they affect the subconscious and unconscious. You can control people by means of language, a certain use of language. And this is how politicians and religious leaders control the masses. And now, excuse me for a while, I'm going to find a place with more shadow. I don't want the sun rays hitting the camera because it can get damaged. Now, as I was saying, I have noticed how our language is affecting the way we think and feel. And in other occasions, I have already explained how the word harmony is one of the most surprising because it contains the word harm, when armonía doesn't harm. So why even musicians don't realize it's a contradiction to say harmony when that word should be armonía, which is the original word. So this means even musicians have something strange in the mind. They are not aware of how they use language. Because for many years I use harmony, but over time I realized there was something wrong, and instinctively I change. I don't say harmony anymore, and I don't greet saying hello. I say hi or hola in Spanish. Hola without H is a wave. Spanish is a very beautiful language, it's very rich. However, we have words that are not used by people because they don't know them. And they are better than some of the words that are popular in Spanish. For instance, thinking in Spanish is pensamiento. And pensamiento includes the word miento, which means I tell a lie. So every time you say thinking, you are saying I tell a lie. You are lying. This is why I suggest using the word mentation, in Spanish it would be mentación, which is the use of the mind, obviously related to thought processes. And that's much better because to mentate is to point something. So thinking is a way of pointing. Therefore, mentation is a better word. Even though in English we can use the word thinking or thought, and that's okay as well. But mentation is better. Notice how people can be our mentors. Nature can be our mentor because it mentates, it points out something that deserves attention. Mentation is also related to meaning. I mean to say something. That plant is meant to be watched, observed, lovingly. So I suggest using this language, which is more connected to the flow of consciousness through life. But this requires knowing ourselves deeper and see how certain words trigger certain emotions. Notice, for instance, how the reactions that we have by listening to certain people are connected to the effect of certain words on our heart. When you listen to someone and you feel resentment or hatred or disgust, maybe it's because that person reminds us of someone that insulted us when we were kids. Maybe that person resembles something, a quality that our dad has, or a friend. It doesn't matter. Every time we feel resentment or hate or rejection towards another person, there is a trauma that needs to be healed. So, in that sense, even those who hurt us, who are not pleasant to us, can be, in a sense, mentors because they are pointing to something. So the outside mirrors the inside. What is in that person pointing that is not healed in me? And that's very interesting because in that sense, everyone can be a teacher. Even the devil can be a teacher. So we have to pay very close attention to everything and why we react, how we react. Then the tool for healing is consciousness and conscience itself. It's more subtle than calculations and complex theories about reality. This is more an ontological way of approaching things. Ontology is the science of reality by means of self-knowledge. Know yourself and you shall know the gods and the whole universe. This was written in the frontispiece of the Temple of Apollo in Greece, together with the phrase, nothing too much, because we also have to be frugal. We should avoid the excess of anything. Food, thinking, overfeeling. We can be overwhelmed by certain emotions that are stuck, and we push them down or try to push them down. But emotions are difficult to deal with because we have to go to the root, which is a viewpoint and a certain type of thinking. So if we can change the viewpoint and the thoughts, then our emotions change, and therefore our actions also change. Our behavior is completely transformed when we think and feel harmoniously from a more clear point of view, which is pure consciousness with integral conscience. And the following day we'll continue exploring this aspect by paying attention to synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, because they are part of the principle of reflection and mirroring. And I can say a woman, a mentor, pointed this out to me many years ago I knew about coincidences, but I didn't pay much attention to them, and I realized that they are part of the language of the universe, and we can learn much about ourselves and the process in which our soul is evolving or devolving, depends. So we have to understand synchronicities from different points of view. There are different types of synchronicities, coincidences. Not all of them are as meaningful as some people might think they are, but there are others which have an origin, and we have to pay attention to this. In any case, we can learn from everything, even from our mistakes. So don't be so mean with yourself. Abandon self-deprecation, self-judgment. Obviously, there is remorse when we go outside the paths of life, but remorse is something different. It's not judgment. It's not accusation. We should not regard ourselves as sinners, transgressors. That is part of the mistake. Religion keeps people sunken down in disease and confusion, precisely because it's not based on understanding the language of nature, the universe, Elohim, the divine forces, which also turn against humanity because humanity was somehow hijacked by certain modifications. So the cause of distress and disease is not completely in humanity. It's obvious that all the suffering and chaos in this earth has not been completely caused by human beings. There were divine architects that made mistakes before us. And therefore, they also became judges. The judgmental attitude in human beings and the courts of justice are not part of humanity. They come from deeper spheres. The world we see is a reflection of something that we don't see. Don't forget that. So there are divine judges that accuse humanity mechanically because they work with certain automatic energies and they want more subtle energy from humanity. But this depends on a more spiritual behavior. And since these divine architects were not able to induce a more spiritual behavior in humanity, they trigger certain catastrophes. So the chaos we see outside is a reflection of certain incapacity of divine architects to correct the situation, the accidents that took place because they lack certain understanding. They modified conditions when in true life nothing should be modified. We should just trust and understand the flow of life from an unconditional loving origin. But even the divine architects didn't understand this. So we should have an attitude of security, of truth in ourselves. Master Ishu brought this message saying that the ruler of this world has already been judged. And this means we should respect nature, we should not accuse, we should not condemn even fallen architects, because it's not part of our role to become judges. And we have to understand what is the cause of all chaos. This is what set us free. The truth will set you free, said the Master. And it's because we see how everything fits in order, even chaos. Everything fits in an order wholeness when we understand the principles of mirroring and reflection. And as I said, the following day we'll explore deeper the question of meaningful coincidences. And for now, thank you very much for listening with attention. Thank you for the little support, the words of support that some people sent to me. Give thumbs up if you found this video inspiring. Will be more in the future. This message is still very new. It was very new 2000 years ago, and it's still very original nowadays, when people still have a very religious mindset, even in the so-called spirituality of the age. But we have to recall the original way of feeling and thinking. Absolute life from the center. Learning with every experience, every thought, every feeling. We have everything right now. So don't worry about not understanding everything, because all is here. We just have to open our eyes. And in the meanwhile, let's keep opening the heart for the unconditional love and modified life, integral conscience, pure consciousness in absolute blissful serenity.